Woohoo. Welcome, everybody. We've got another YouTube live tonight. So excited to be with you guys. And as everybody comes in, please enter into the chat, introduce yourself, and tell us where you're from. And as you come in, so we're going to get started here in just a second. All right, looks like everything is a go. Very good. All right, so tonight I have my Aussie friends, John McCluckie and Lynda Rich with me tonight. And thanks, guys, for giving me your Sunday morning. I really appreciate it, even though it's Saturday night here. It's so trippy. It's so fun to do the time warp. And today we have a little bit of a, I don't know, Lynda and I were just talking, we have a little bit of a somber subject tonight, but I think an important subject. And a lot of people have questions about this subject, and that is the subject of pain. And it's kind of a little bit like a big part of the human experience, suffering and pain and challenges and that kind of thing. And so it's kind of important to be able to unpack it. So that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. Pain unmasked. What is it? What does it mean? How do we transmute it into power? And what's the point of all of it anyway? Just some of the random questions that might come up. So please use the chat feature. Hi, Kathleen. Good to see you. Please use the chat feature. Oh, hi, Brian. And let us know you're here and where you're from. And I'm going to ask Lynda to introduce herself. And Lynda, it's always fun for our audience, for people to find out, how'd you find Dolores and how'd you get into this QHHT thing?
Oh, I just tell people I followed the feathers. That was basically it. I just got led into it. I suppose, well, my practice, just to give some context, I'm based in Wollongong, which is about an hour south of Sydney in New South Wales, Australia. My background was in psychology and psychotherapy and clinical hypnotherapy. Yes, another psychotherapist. But I've been studying metaphysics since I was a kid, so it's always been sort of lifelong interest. But I'd also done, when I did my undergrad in psychology, I then went off, did counselling for a while, and then I got sidetracked into corporate marketing for 6 years and did postgraduate studies in that and business. And then I helped my husband run his business for 14 years. And so I had 20 years of very left brain things. And then when I got to come back home here to Wollongong, then I headed back into psychotherapy, and that sort of led me to Dolores. Dolores was looking at what I was studying apparently and tapped me on the shoulder and wouldn't leave me alone. This was in 2018. So through YouTube, thank you, YouTube. Just every search I had, she was there and she was not going to leave me alone. So I found out about that, and that's how I got into QHHT. So I was studying the postgraduate holistic counselling and psychotherapy at the time when she came into my life, which really amazed me because I had been studying metaphysics since the mid-70s. But I think in the time when she was really doing a lot of her work around the 80s and 90s, I was off sort of studying, the mediums and all of that sort of thing. So yeah, I've always found it interesting. So that's how I got into it. I've been doing it now for 5 years.
Yeah. Oh, I was going to say, so that introduction was 2018. So yeah, very good. Very good. And you're level 3 and practicing in what was the name of the town again? Say that again.
It's Wollongong. If you think of a ball of wool on top of a gong, you got it. I just never get Wollongong for some reason.
Got it.
John's laughing.
Yeah.
All right, John, you introduce yourself, and how did you get into all of this metaphysical craziness?
The metaphysical side. I was always interested in how hypnotherapists could stop smoking. So I kind of started off down the NLP track and did a course in that, and that helped me a lot. Just clearing a lot of emotional stuff. Like it was so good. But I knew there was more. I just had a feeling there's more. We can go deeper into this kind of stuff. Just because the reason why I felt like that was because NLP was awesome. I love it. I still use it in my clinical practice. Great maintenance. But I just felt you could go deeper into it. Like you could get quicker results.
Mm-hmm.
And NLP didn't really cover, for me, what I learned. It didn't really cover the smoking stuff. And that's what I wanted to learn. Like, so then I was like, oh, shit, I got to learn the clinical hypnosis side of things. So I went deeper into it and learned the clinical hypnosis, did that, loved it. I still do it today, still love doing it. And it's really quick, really good to focus on one area, on one thing, like whether it's anxiety, can figure out on that, or depression, can really focus on that, or if it's pain management, can really focus on that. Really good for that sort of stuff, because it only takes about 40 minutes or an hour, and it's done and it's cleared, gone. But then I kind of got into the past life regression, which was good fun. I didn't really want to get into it. But when I was studying the clinical stuff, it was a add-on after it to the clinical stuff. And this lady that I really trusted her. She was a good friend of mine. And she was like, man, that is so down your alley. She said, you would love it. And I was like, what are you even talking about? So it was funny because the teacher was actually going to use me for the subject to guinea pig on. Yeah. And I said to her, because I didn't really find out about it until the night before the class. And then she said, oh, no, it's fully booked out. You can't come. And then she had a cancellation about half an hour later, and she said, oh, you're booked in. And so I went and learned that, and it was so much fun. It was just so much fun. Yeah. Very different to the clinical stuff, but a lot more fun. Sometimes the clinical works really, really well. Sometimes the past life regression stuff works really, really well. So there's no one solution that fits all. And then part of the past life regression, they had a tribute to all the greats, to all the pioneers. So the first one that came up was Dr. Brian Weiss. Amazing man, amazing, the most beautiful human being you'll ever meet in your life. And then it was Dr. Michael Newton that does the life between life stuff. And then third was Dolores Cannon. And as soon as I saw her picture, I just went, I know what it is. It's in clinical stuff, we call it eye lock. We just lock onto something. And man, I could just, because I'm a feeler, I'm not a visual person at all. I'm more of a feeler. And I could just feel the energy of it. Whatever that energy was I could just feel it. And then I got thoughts in my head, and it was sentences. And then as soon as she went, I asked the teacher about Dolores, and she answered word for word what those downloads were. It was word for word. And I was like, wow, that's really interesting. So there was something about that. Yeah. And I don't know if it was Dolores's voice, but it was like an old lady kind of voice. So however the universe works is right. Yeah. And then, so because people were in the past life regression, because they were all into Dolores and Brian Weiss and Michael Newton, it was a real good energy. So I was practicing at lunchtime on the other students, and it was just clicking. It was just so good. Yeah. So I kind of just adapted it and shortened it down, got really good results in lunchtime, and the teacher didn't like it for some reason. but that's okay. It's all right. Yeah. We've moved on from that. But then after that, so I didn't really kind of get into Dolores or anything like that. And I was always interested in what she kind of taught, and how she did her healings and all that sort of stuff. So I watched a little bit of YouTube, and then I remember hanging out the washing once, and that voice, that old lady's voice, and it said, go and do it now, like right now. And I never met Dolores in real life, but apparently she could be quite stern. Apparently. And so I didn't even finish off hanging out the washing. Like I just joined up for the level 1, and man, I just binged it like I was watching friggin' Netflix.
Wow.
But I could see because I had my clinical experience and I had the past life experience, I could see what she was doing from a technical point of view. So I broke it down technically, and she answered so many questions I had about the technical side of things. And I could see how much love and how much thought that she put into it. She must have been a very, very caring person for the client in her sessions. Very empathic and very caring.
It's a masterpiece. The QHHT script is a masterpiece. It really is. Yeah.
Yeah. I'd agree with that. Yeah. Not saying that other things aren't a masterpiece as well. But for QHHT, Dolores, it's a masterpiece for what Dolores wanted. Yeah. Because I don't want to put I don't want to put anything above something else and saying this is a masterpiece and everything else isn't. Because there's other things that are masterpieces as well, like other therapies and all that sort of stuff. So I don't want it to be a competition and say this is the best one and that's the best one. But I could see how much effort and how much love that she put into it. Yeah, and tweaking things. And I just resonated with the person that she was. I think so. I just took it really seriously, like really seriously. Yeah. And I like it because it's more open. So with clinical, we're going back on specific things, whereas I like this. And past life regression, we're going back on past life, so we're leading them into another life. Whereas Dolores, the QHHT, is just open. You just go wherever you want to go, and just tell me where you're going, and I'm going to bounce off you.
Right.
Yeah, like it's so easy, and it's so much more authentic that way.
Right.
And it's so much more fun because we never know what's going to happen.
Right. I describe it as it's like if you play piano, and I don't play piano, but if you play piano, it's like the difference between playing chopsticks and playing jazz. And jazz is just, you got to feed off of each other and you don't know where you're going next. Right.
Yeah.
That's
right. It's a team effort. It's fun. It's fun being a facilitator.
So how long have you been practicing QHHT, John?
2017 I did that level 1 class. Yeah. I think it was 2017. Yeah.
Cool.
But it's good fun.
Cool. Cool.
It's good fun doing it as a job.
Yeah, it is. I always say I have the best job in the universe. Are you kidding me? It doesn't get better than this.
Yeah. It's a great way to help people. Look, I think the overall umbrella of us all is because we're here to help. I think that's the overall underlying umbrella. Yeah, it's just different genres in helping.
To me, the cool thing, though, in that regard with QHHT is you're actually facilitating the client helping themselves. Like, I don't have any answers. I'm not giving any answers here. I'm not doing any diagnosis or anything. You're telling you what you need to know, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. We're just asking questions.
Higher consciousness.
Yeah. All right. So we have my mom's on the line. Hi, Mom. Brenda from Tennessee.
Oh, that's so cute.
Hi, Mom. All right, let's talk about pain, guys. Thank you for introducing yourself. So let's talk a little bit about pain. So our title tonight is Pain Unmasked: Relief Through Understanding. And it's really about this transformative journey from pain to power. And we all have, it's part of the human experience. If we wanted an experience of perfect peace and non-suffering and no sense of time, perfect peace in eternity, we wouldn't be having this human experience, right? We would have never incarnated. We'd still be only there, right?
That's not the human experience.
Right. And so obviously there's an if you're watching this as a human being, you obviously your soul had wanted the experience of the human, which is inextricably linked to our experience of suffering, but we can begin to understand that experience of suffering as not something negative, something that we wanted and something that we're learning through and something that is ultimately positive. I didn't say pleasant. I just said positive. So it's not necessarily pleasant, but it's important. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. So kind of a little bit of a somber subject, but I think a super, 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 super important subject. So let's start with this question. So John, what's your definition? What's pain? What is it? What does that mean to you?
Oh, that's a hard one because there's so much umbrella to pain. Because there's so many different forms of pain. So
physical,
like this,
emotional, mental,
physical, yep, psychological, yep. There's, so it depends on what people come in for and what's causing it. Because if you have a tight spot in the body or a weak spot in the body, and if you have any emotional pain, it's going to find that. It's going to find that, and it's going to make it worse. So somebody who's got tense shoulders like that because they're on a computer all day, so that's a physical pain. If they feel any kind of stress, it's tending to go to there. But I think that's a message to go. There's physical pain here. You need to work on it and adapt on it, or something like that. But it depends on what's causing it. Like somebody who's a concreter, in the trades and concreting, like they will have bad backs because they're bent over all day, every day. That's like they're going to have a bad back. So that's a posture thing. Yeah. So it depends on what's causing the pain.
Or it could be injury from a car accident or something like that.
It could be, and there's a lot of that where the body doesn't reset. Yeah. Like I get pain. I get pain sometimes on the inside of my rib cartilage because I broke my ribs when I was boxing. Yeah. And because you can't, there's not much you can do for ribs, so they kind of reset, but they didn't reset perfectly. So then that's causing every now and then it'll pinch on the inside of the cartilage of my rib. Yeah. And it's very painful, and I've got to get my fingers in there and get in between the ribs and kind of pull them apart. It doesn't sound very nice.
That sounds painful.
It sounds painful, and people get a little bit sick when they watch me doing it because I've got to like get right in there on the inside of my rib cage and start pulling it down on that spot, and start massaging it. Yeah. It's very painful. It's a bit of a sensation, but I can prepare myself for it. Yeah. So, but that's because it was an injury and it hasn't reset properly. Yeah. But the body's it's so strong, but it's so delicate at the same time. You ask anybody with nerve pain, oh my God, the nerves are so delicate and they run down your spine. It's such a fine line. Yeah. So it depends on what kind of pain it is and what's causing it and what they're prepared to do to change. So going back to like a concreter might come in and they've been concreting for 15 years, haven't even thought about doing anything else. Like it's never even been in their psyche that they can possibly do anything else. And then you're like, well, if you keep concreting, something's got to change. Otherwise it just keeps going. If you keep doing the same thing, well then nothing's really going to change. You might get a little bit of maintenance to help it a little bit. But have you ever thought about doing something else? And straight away they'll defend it and go, nah, well, what am I supposed to do? Because they're thinking of the present moment. Yeah. They're not thinking, oh, well, if I study and do this, and it might take me 3 or 4 years before I can do this. Like they're defending their own pain.
Well, that's another example of how their body is experiencing this malformation, that this stuckedness, right? Because of the repeated motion. And then that is being reflected in their
in their psyche.
in their psyche of
Mm,
being stuckedness also. So I think
yes,
there's this huge
that's it.
symbiosis between
That's it.
mental and physical pain. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, you just have to get somebody who kind of knows what the right questions are, just to finally, just to delicately just get in there and do that. A lot of people have knee problems. It might be a posture thing, it might be the way that they walk, but sometimes they'll have knee problems because they're being very stubborn. So a part of them wants to, like, maybe move into a different career that they really love, but then the other part of them is keeping stuck because they can't get that fear to move forward. So then their knees are having a battle with themselves. So they're going forward, going back, going forward, going back, and then that's causing friction in their knees. Yeah, knees are a really funny one. Yeah, yeah. It always cracks me up. But it's because they're having that internal battle with themselves.
Yep.
So that's an emotional. It could be an emotional problem causing a physical symptom. We get that a lot. You know?
Yeah.
You get that. Oh my God, you get that so much.
Yep.
So much. You
Yep.
know? That's what breast cancer is.
Yeah.
No?
Yeah. Yeah.
Breast cancer it's not rocket science. All you got to do, is usually it starts off from a broken heart, and it's got to do with nurturing. And it's usually either a parent issue or kid issues. But that's because it's gonna go straight to the breast, because that's the nurturing part. That's the part of life that we give. So with anybody with breast cancer, all you have to do is just figure out what's happened to them. Like, it could be 18 months or a year, because it doesn't just appear like that. Sometimes it takes time.
All of this physical manifestation takes time. Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't take 5 seconds. Yeah. But then the penny starts dropping, like, oh my God. Yeah, that's when my daughter died, or something. It's like, yeah. Well, how do you deal with that grief? And because society, the Western world, doesn't deal with grief at all, they just have to be stoic, and society calls it strong, not showing the emotions and just getting on with life. Yeah. So what does it do? It goes there because that's part of them that's missing.
Right. It's got to go somewhere. Yeah.
It's got to go somewhere. Yeah. So even when people with that, they still have to do the emotional healing as well, because if they don't do the emotional healing, well, then that is going to move. They might cut their breasts off, but it's going to move. It's going to move somewhere else, because that energy of that grief is still stored in the body. They haven't released it.
Yeah.
Sometimes in an operation they might get it, that they might get it out, but sometimes it doesn't. So it just depends on, that's what I mean. There's different kinds of healing, and there's different kinds of pain. So it can be complicated.
Lynda, what's your definition of pain? What does that mean to you? What does that word mean to you?
I think ultimately, whether it's physical or emotional or psychological, it's a messenger. And that's what we find time and time again in our work in QHHT, is that if the client has not got a direct communication with their higher consciousness or their guidance, or whatever people like to call that, Dolores called it subconscious, but if they don't, the only thing that part of ourselves has to communicate with us is the physical body. So it'll show up as symptoms. And so, like John was saying with breast, if someone tells me sort of what is going on in the body, I can pretty well figure out what I think may have been happening at that time. And so it's really important to ask the client about what was happening at the time it showed up. But things like, if it's the right side of the body, it's usually current life. It's left side of the body, it might be earlier this life or past life, or, breast could be nurturing of self as well as related to parents, or the nurturing they receive from their parents, or the nurturing they receive from their children. But even things like car accidents, their messages as well. You know, I always ask a client if they've had any major accidents, because sometimes if we're just not listening, they need to do something shocking to put us in the right path, if that makes sense. So it's when you're actually in the experience, it is overwhelming and not pleasant. But if you can get this kind of meta position looking down on it, like, why is that happening? Why have I got this particular thing happening in the body? I think like a client that I had recently, she had a torn tendon in one of her elbows, and the message when we went into QHHT to find out why that injury had happened, the part of herself that we have the privilege to talk to, the higher consciousness, they said that it's because she was being a martyr and she wasn't asking for help. She got it through lifting something when she wasn't. So in the session, because the message was received, she was able to have that completely healed. She woke up, there was no pain, she could move it. But then it just depends on whether she took the advice. She phoned me a few days later to say that it was back. And I said, well, have you been asking for help? And she says, no. So it returns. But I think ultimately it's just trying to understand what the body is trying to communicate to you. So that's how I would see pain. Yeah, and if you're not paying attention, it can get worse and worse. I remember, like John was saying about knees, I remember a particular job I was supposed to leave because I was supposed to be heading towards QHHT, and I was being, oh no, I need money, I need to in 3D. First I started out with knee problems, then I started out with plantar fasciitis in both feet. Then I was on a walking stick. I still wasn't getting the message, so I got a hit around the head with a 2x4 moment. So it's just like, you will move out of that job into this path. So the more that we can understand what these messages through symptoms of the body are, the more we can align our body to be in probably less pain to get the message. And I don't want to not respect anybody's experience who is going through this at the moment, because it's not fun when you're in it. And but there are pathways out. Yeah. And I suppose that's what you were talking about with pathway from pain to power. It's once you understand what the message is and you move in that direction, you have the power to be able to direct your life the way it's supposed to be directed. Pain comes up when there is something of dis-ease in the body. So, or out of discomfort. So, because we're supposed to be in comfort, but the experience is we need to learn, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm wondering too, so what this brings up for me too is this, well, like what we were talking about earlier, that if your soul never wanted to experience pain or suffering or challenge, you would never have incarnated as a human, right? Because there are soul growth benefits of having this kind of experience. But to me, part of understanding that as pain and suffering is, our perspective, right? How we define pain and suffering. Well, is it, or could you take the exact same, if it's a physical sensation, or, John, we were talking about grief earlier, or some sort of like really deep emotional challenge, and be able to see it just even in your monkey mind, right? Even in your human mind, be able to understand the bigger picture, and the eternal picture is what I mean by bigger picture. And then does that change the sensation itself because your perspective on the experience has changed? Does that make sense?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think a big part of it too is if you can funnel it down and go, you're not your body, but you have a body. So let's disassociate ourselves, get outside of ourselves and see what's going on as the body, and use the body as its own entity. But then you can break down the parts of that body as well and go and that's why I really enjoy Soul Speak as well, like Julia Cannon's one, because it's very short, very sharp. But you can isolate one part of your body, and you can actually just go and talk to it and find out what's going on. Yeah. Whereas QHHT, it's same, but different. Yeah. Whereas QHHT will go through the whole thing because we have more time. Yeah, but I think a lot of it is dissociating yourself from your body. Yeah, I think that's why hypnosis is so good. Yeah, because we can turn off the central nervous system, let the body basically go to sleep. That's why people will never be in pain when they're hypnotized. They'll never be in pain while they're hypnotized. It's impossible. Yeah. So then when they're relaxed, well, then we can go and actually get right in there and see what's actually going on. Yeah, which is good fun, and it blows people's minds. It blows them away. But so many people get locked into their body, yeah, and they think that they are their body.
Right.
I love the way Dolores puts it, that this is just the suit of clothes to play the character in the play that we write before we come in. I mean, when you start to look at your experience here as the soul's experience to learn and grow various lessons, you can see how these experiences of pain might help you learn those lessons. But it's interesting how sometimes, John, in these experiences, Holly, you probably had this too, is that sometimes the origin of the pain that the person's experienced isn't even in this lifetime.
Right.
It's in another lifetime, and it's been triggered by something in this life to show up again. And so that's always really fascinating.
Yeah.
I've had people who've been to so many doctors, so many scans, not found it, come see me as a last result, and ended up it wasn't even from this life.
Yeah. I had this client that I wrote about in my last book, and she had her right arm, just her arm, she had burned it badly when she was like 5 years old. And so she had to have all of that, like skin grafting and everything. She had bone cancer in her right arm, like for years, and had to have like a major section taken out and metal put in and this and that and this and that, joints replaced and whatever. And it was just her right arm. Otherwise, she was completely healthy. And what was revealed in her QHHT session was her grandfather, so her mother's father, had fought in World War I or II, I can't remember, one of the wars anyway, and had a severely damaged arm. He couldn't use his arm because of the injury from the war. And then so the grandfather, the mother's father, died when the mother was only 6. And he reincarnated as my client to be the daughter of the mother that was the daughter to the father. Okay, so 3 generations here. And the reincarnation included this damaged and experience with this right arm, thinking that the mother would put it together and go, well, that's the same thing happened to my dad. Isn't that weird? Right. And it did not have anything to do with any reasonable physical cause or anything, but it was intended to be this similarity that would wake up the mother who had been the daughter to go, it's me, I reincarnated as your daughter. Isn't that crazy?
Wow.
And so you can only imagine the pain she went through with skin grafts and bone replacement and joint replacement and all of this, but yet it didn't have anything to do with anything other than this message, this reincarnation message. Wow.
So what happened with her? What happened with her and her arm?
So the higher self said, I don't know if you guys have seen this in her QHHT session, but she had so little physical structure left in her arm, they couldn't do anything. They said there's nothing here to fix. They couldn't even, what was fascinating to me is they couldn't see the metal. They said there's nothing here because her bones were metal at this point, most of them. And they said, we can't see it. They couldn't see the dead, metal that was actually in her arm. And I mean, obviously they unraveled the whole reincarnation thing for her, but in terms of healing and repairing her arm, there wasn't enough there to fix for her.
That's another thing that people have to realize too. Like sometimes that happens.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it's just the way it is. Yeah, but we always want to get an explanation of why.
Right. Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Especially if it is a message. And yeah.
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 Yeah, totally. Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. So let's talk a little more about this connection between emotional pain and physical pain. Which starts first? Which do you think, or does it matter, or is it, and do they feed off of themselves? Like, does it always start with emotions and then go to physical, or can it go from physical into emotions? What do you guys think?
Can go either way. I'm thinking about the the example I often give, which is the old Viktor Henkel stuff, is if there's somebody's in front seat, head-on collision, same car, and exactly the same injuries. If you've got one person in there going, "Oh, woe is me, my life will never be the same again. I'm injured, I won't be able to work," their life spirals down, and they end up into repeating pain. And then you've got the other one who might have the different perspective on the experience, saying, "Oh, well, I survived, and so therefore I'm going to make the most of this experience. I'm going to do the most you can." So you can see how there's, out of that one physical incident, there's so many different emotional experiences from it.
Yeah. Yeah. There's the famous,
totally.
story of the brothers of the alcoholic father, and one vows to never drink again, and then the other one becomes an alcoholic himself. Yeah.
Yeah. That would happen in probably about the first 8 years of that young boy's life. One would have just followed the same path as his dad, and the other would have made a real strong decision at some point. And it's usually in those first 7 years that I will not do this. Yes. It's kind of like the coin, and then they'll flip it over. Yeah. And then the one that doesn't drink will start off a whole new lineage that doesn't relate to that. Yeah. Whereas the other son that just basically turned into his dad will just keep that karma rolling until somebody down the line flips the coin over. Yeah, it's really interesting. Cool
I see a lot of clients are here to break those sorts of ancestral patterns.
Yes.
So I often go back a little bit further in their story to see what, if they're like this, what's happened here, and then the client through the guidance they get, or how they were anyway by the time they got to see me, they're breaking those ancestral patterns. But it's interesting you said up to 7 years, John, because Rudolf Steiner talks about how the first 7 years are so formative and important in the development of the soul and the experience.
Yeah, it makes up about 93.8% of a person's whole life. Yeah, those first 7 years are so pliable. Yeah, it's incredible.
Well, and how many times are you in a QHHT session doing some sort of physical healing, and the higher self says, "Well, that's just what she believes," and so the belief, which is of course going to come in that early childhood programming, is setting up the experience for the illness. Yeah.
Well, sometimes you go and you think there's all these messages and metaphysical things, and you go and talk to the higher conscious. Oh no, it's just physical. They had an accident back when they were two that nobody knew about and they didn't remember, and they're able to, like, it's just a physical thing. So you think you got it?
It happens plenty of times. Yeah, that they could have had a horse accident or fallen off a horse when they were 5 years old, and they just consciously just can't remember it.
Right.
Yeah. The body's a delicate vehicle.
Yeah.
It's very delicate. Yeah.
I've had, you were talking, John, earlier you were talking about, hypnosis for stop smoking, lose weight, whatever. But I've had a handful of clients who came in wanting, it's just one of the things on their list, stop smoking.
On their list, yeah.
Or vaping. And I've had a handful of clients who the higher self said, one of my questions is it appropriate for Mary to smoke cigarettes or vape or whatever? And the higher self will go, well, she can if she wants. It doesn't matter. And so from their perspective, it's the belief that this is gonna give me lung cancer or do whatever that is contributing to then the negative effects of the illnesses that then domino from that. But if it seems like, at least for some people, if if they could smoke 3 packs a day for the rest of their life, and they'd probably be perfectly healthy because their belief system was it's not going to hurt.
It plays a part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. A belief plays a big part of it. It's not the whole story, but it plays a big part of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But smoking is always a conscious mind problem. It's not an unconscious mind problem. It's a conscious mind problem. It's just become a habit. So
right.
Yeah, it's very different to QHHT, which is purely subconscious or higher self. Yeah, which is cool fun because they're seeing things from a higher perspective. Yeah, but the problem is, I think, is the higher you go, the less it really matters.
Right. The rest,
because this is only one blip. This is only one blip in a soul's experience, right?
You're only there for 100 years. What does it matter, right? Yeah. Compared to eternity.
It matters to them. It matters to them. Yeah.
But I had one of these clients I was just remembering, it was a young lady. She was in her 20s. She was 20, barely 20. And her mother was paying for the session. And her mother was paying for the session because she was going to quit vaping, right, out of the session. And her mother was very interested in her to not vape anymore. And she was one of the ones where the higher self went, she can vape if she wants. It doesn't matter. And I'm like, oh no, no.
Whereas I had a client, and the first thing, as soon as I got her under and connected, it was on to her about vaping. Like that was the reason they got her to come see me. Like they were not happy about that. So but it's interesting, as you say, you don't know what level of the person.
You don't know what level,
you're going to get. And then, sometimes when you're up talking sort of like 7th dimension or above, and they're pulling me up all the time on judgment, like, is this a good thing or is this a bad thing? And they say, no, well, there is no good or bad. It's all experience, they're constantly pulling me up. So it really depends on the part of the consciousness.
And there's consequences to everything.
Or experiences to everything.
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, but going back to your question, Holly, whether the pain comes first or the emotion comes first, I'm with Lynda. I don't think it really matters, but I think it's interlooped, and I think it can get stuck in a cycle, in it. And how many times have you heard people like they're in pain and they hate that part of their body because they hate it, they're rejecting it. It's like, oh my goodness, that's terrible. That pain must be so painful, but it must have been there for a long time, so it must turn into chronic pain. But they end up by hating their body for it, or their body part. It's like, and then you go and talk to it, and it's the exact opposite of what it wants and what it needs.
I had a session a while ago so the client was very invested and adept at law of attraction, right? And so she knew not to hate that part of her body that was in pain, and to integrate it and send it love and whatnot. But what the higher self told her was a little complex, but she was sending the I can't remember what it was, if it was like bladder or female organs or something. I can't remember what it was, but the higher self said she was sending the pain too much love. It was sticking around.
Yeah, that's funny.
So the pain was like, I'm gonna stick around. I think it might have been a tumor or something. I don't remember. Cyst maybe. And she was sending the cyst so much love that the cyst didn't want to leave.
That's funny. It sounds to me like she needed to tweak her life just a little bit, to tweak some direction and just a little bit.
But it's okay to send it on its way. It's not okay.
Yeah, totally.
It's okay to tell it you don't need to be here right now.
You've received the message. Off you go.
Do you guys think everyone experiences pain and suffering at some point in their life, or are there really incarnations where it's just skipping through the daisies with zero suffering?
I don't believe so. I think that people will tell you that, but I think that they're bullshitting and they're just lying. But I don't know. If we're here to experience human emotions, because I think that's what the human experience is about, is the emotional layers to it. Yeah. So we're going to go through all the layers. Yeah. Yeah. And it doesn't matter, like somebody's worst day is going to be their worst day. It's just going to be just as bad as somebody else's worst day, because the emotional trauma is going to be the same. So I don't believe that there's any human that doesn't go through any kind of pain, physical or emotional, hurt, or God, even some of the worst pain, some of the most emotionally worst pain that a human being can feel is loneliness. Like, we're pack animals. There are so many people out there that feel so alone, even though they're surrounded by people. Yeah, that's more of a soul connection, I think. Their soul's lonely. Yeah, but they can't consciously understand why they feel it. That can be really heartbreaking. Really heartbreaking.
Yeah, there's some really painful emotions. We talked about grief, loneliness, meaninglessness.
Yeah.
I think
yeah, sorry, Lynda.
Sorry, I was just thinking back to a client, and I think grief is one of the worst, but I think oftentimes what we fail to understand with grief is that we're actually grieving for the life we wanted with that person, or we wanted for that person, if that makes sense. And so
we had an expectation.
We know through this work is fine, but that's sometimes people don't understand that that's what the grief may also include. I hope that's helpful.
And they can be intertwined. The grief can be an individual, a personal, then reflective fear of loneliness. Right. Yeah. I'm grieving for myself because now I'm alone.
Yeah. That's because a human being always has conditions on things, right? We always do. Yeah. It always cracks me up, all these people that go, oh, they're trying to achieve unconditional love. Unconditional love. I send them unconditional love. And I'm like, I personally believe that no human can do that. I don't, and I get that belief system from, because for me, the most intense love that I've ever felt was when my kids have been born. Like, oh my God, my heart was just, and I'm a dad, I'm not even a mum. So it's going to be a million times more intense for the mum, because that baby is a part of them. Yeah. But you'll feel so much love at that time. But if that baby stops breathing, what's the human going to do? Go into panic. It's going to go into stress. That's not unconditional love, because unconditional love will be like, oh, it's okay. It's kind of like if you have a small child, like 2 or 3 years old, and you see a bully like 10 or 12 years old, and they're ripping into that little innocent child. That mother part is going to go out and defend its child. It just is. But that's not unconditional love, because now you're angry towards that other person. So you can't avoid that as being a human being. Yeah. We're here for the emotional ups and downs.
Well, number one, we're animals. And then number two,
totally.
Very unique animals that have this emotional range.
Yes. Yeah. And I always say, because I always think the highest emotion that we can have is joy. I don't think love is an emotion. I think love is a vibration that we can tap into. I don't think that it's an emotion. But for me personally, I think the lowest of the low is hopelessness and helplessness, feeling helpless. That's when people take their own life, because they lose hope. They've tried to reach out, and they're beyond sad, they're beyond depression, they're beyond lonely, they're helplessness. So they feel the only way out is that. But I think that the humans, we're the only ones in the whole universe, only creatures that can go from the top of the top to the bottom of the bottom in a split second from an external force. So you could be having the best day of your life, Everything is just the day of your dreams. And you could get a phone call to say that your daughter's been in a car crash and she's got about 15 minutes to live, and she wants to talk to you. Oh my God, you will go down into hopelessness, because you can't do anything. You just can't do anything. Like, that is so out of your control. There is no emotion. There is no human being that won't do that. So for a human being to say that they're always happy and all that, and I've always been happy, and it's like, I don't think so. Yeah. You could have a current that's pretty happy or pretty content, but you're going to get ups and downs. Yeah. And those ups and downs are going to cause physical things in the body. So when you get that phone call, you're going to go into stress, and your heart is just going to go boom, 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 boom. And who knows? Could you have a heart attack? Who knows? Or an anxiety attack or something. Or just have a mental breakdown. It's just part of the human experience.
It is. It is. And we asked for it. And Dolores said that, you know, what she found, I've never really explored this with a higher self. I don't have any reason not to believe what she said. But you know, there are souls waiting in line for a human body, right? This is like the golden ticket, you know, to be able to have this human experience. So.
Yeah, that's what I always say to people. If they're here now, I know it's not been a fun experience for many over the last few years, but they've got the golden ticket, because I've had so many clients that have had other sort of souls, not in a creepy way, but other beings sort of experiencing what we're experiencing now through the client, because there just simply weren't enough physical bodies to be here. So I've had that quite a few times. So yeah. I think we get a bit of a respect in the universe for coming to Earth. It's not easy.
I think that's why there's so many human beings here at the moment. Like the world's never been so populated. There's never been so many human beings. But I also think on a bigger perspective, because I ask a lot of questions about that and get a lot of information about that. I think that's because this is the big shift. This is the big shift from where human beings are going to be different, because in another 3 generations, those human beings are going to be very different to us, very different. And I think there's a lot of souls that have been here for such a long time, and there's a lot of people that are tired, like really tired. Their body's tired, they're emotionally tired, their soul's tired, because this is their last go, because they've done all that work to help humanity, help Earth, and this change, and it's their time to go out. And they're not going to come back until a long time over. So it'll be really interesting to see what human beings are like in our grandkids' generation. Because, like, you just look at neuroscience and what's that, and what that's the medical science is just amazing. Man, just even the operations that they can do now is just incredible. Like, you go back 60, 70 years ago, 100 years ago, and they were just getting a saw and just chopping people's arms off.
Right.
It's incredible. Yeah. So I think it's a big shift in there. Yeah. So, and I think there's a lot of souls come down here to squeeze in one last go and trying to get as much in as they can.
But do you guys think, though, on that topic, though, John, I mean, so I have a lot of clients that think, you know, they've read Dolores, they've read about the new Earth, you know, they've heard things about new Earth or Earth shift or ascension. And then they'll say something like, oh, I'll be so glad when all of this is over, you know, and the Earth shift happens and we never have to have 3D again. And I'm like, well, no, I think you're missing the point. Earth isn't going to have that experience, but there's going to be other places in the universe that will have that experience, you know. Souls are still going to want to have the super duper, you know, ridiculously challenging kind of experience. Don't you think? It's just not going to be here.
I think so. Yeah.
You get clients that go back to lives on other planets, and sometimes, you know, they just do not have, like, they're already living kind of the 5D experience. Like the 3D is the exciting bit, if that makes sense. Like, this is where you can have the most growth. This is where you can do the most, like, experience a lot of stuff. Whereas other places, they just live in peace and love and joy, and they hang out and communicate, and they don't have no needs, and they don't eat, and all these sort of things. Whereas on Earth, it's like, whoa, this is really interesting. So
it's kind of like, if you ask a lot of people, whether they'll go to heaven or hell. And a lot of people will be like, oh, heaven sounds so boring. Sounds so boring. Like that's the 5D. Like it's boring. Like I'd rather go and have a bit of an adventure.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
yeah.
but I think that's what the human experience is. It's an adventure, right? It's an experience. It's an experience that you can't get anywhere else.
All right. Brian says, suggesting grief is love with no place to go. That's cool. That's cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Without love, you can't have grief, right?
Right. Right. Yeah.
That's the duality. That's the opposite.
Yeah. How do you get rid of pain? So if our listeners are in pain, I'm sure several people have come in tonight because they want the answer. They're done with it. And so what do you think? What's your advice to someone who's experiencing pain and they're done
I'll
with
let Lynda go first.
Well, I don't want to be flippant on this, but it's find out the message of it. Come and have a QHHT session if you can't figure it out for yourself. It's as John was saying, talk to the bit that's in pain. What do you need? And if you can't have that communication, come and find out what the message is. Because, once we get whatever the understanding from it is in session, then that energy and that message doesn't need to stay there. It can be released. And so that would be my advice, I think. But also to kind of just sit with the experience for a while and see if you can get any messages from it. But if you've been living with it for a long time, I know that will be challenging. But I've had clients that have come in with an extraordinary amount of pain, and as soon as the message is received, it's resolved.
Sometimes, though, I think, John, you mentioned this a little bit earlier, like with the knees, if the message requires some sort of change that's challenging, that might, the person might be afraid of the change.
It's fear.
Yeah.
That's fear.
Yeah. So then what do you do with that fear?
Well, then you've got to, this is how I do it. So then you'd disassociate yourself from the fear. And then you'd ask that part of you, what are you actually scared of? And then that's having a good conversation with yourself. And going, okay, well, I'm scared, but what am I actually scared of? And then having that conversation with yourself and just listening to it, because that part of you has got a message as well. So that's when you're kind of digging deeper. So the knee is doing the symptom stuff, but there's actually a deeper meaning into it, because it's the actual, it could be stubbornness, but why are you stubborn? It's because it's scared. So then you go into that part and go, well, where does this fear come from?
Where does it originate?
What am I really afraid of?
What are you really afraid of? And giving it love, and that's where the love and compassion comes from, and not the judgment. And seeing what it's actually scared of, because a lot of the times it doesn't. Sometimes it knows, and sometimes it doesn't know. It's just an emotion that's stuck there, which is just stuck emotions. It's just stuck there. So it just depends. And then it depends what's causing it as well. Like I've got a beautiful friend. He's such a good friend, and I just love him to bits. And he had his QHHT session, and it was the funniest. It was the best one I've ever had. And he had this ET come to him, and so the ET was perceived as his higher self, and he wanted to know his purpose in life, because he was a bit lost, and all it would say was pain. And I was like, can you elaborate on that? And it was just pain.
Wow.
And I could not get anything else. That's all it would say. Even through all his other questions, wasn't even interested in that. Just pain. When you go through the body, pain. And it just went over and over and over again. Asked for somebody else to be there. No. It was like that for friggin' half an hour. Drove me bonkers. And then it just went. Like it was just gone. So then I counted them out, and he was like, what the hell? He was like, am I supposed to be in pain my whole life? Like, what the hell does that mean? Yeah. But now he's a posture and pain specialist. He gets people out of physical pain, and he is amazing.
Wow.
Amazing. He's found his life passion and his purpose, and he is going to help thousands and thousands. Like I send so many of my clients to him. If the SC says that's a structural problem. So a structural problem, like me, like I had one. So I had pain at the back of my trach. So because he understands all the myofascial systems and the different systems within the myofascial system, because that's the connective tissue that connects everything. So he actually tracked it around, and he said, oh, it's got nothing to do with there. He actually tracked it around to my inner pec up there, and I could feel him like doing all the muscle fibers and stuff. And then he got to one point, and it was like, oh my God. And he just released it. And he released it. So it was this one. So what happened was, so this one was so tight that it was pulling my shoulder like that, but I didn't know. So then the tension was there, but it's the opposite. Yeah. So he released it, and then it just went, boom. And it's never been a problem since. So, but sometimes when I felt stressed, I could feel it there. Yeah. But that's because it was already a weak spot, because this was already tight, because I'm on a computer sometimes and I'm hunched over. So pain is a real delicate one, because sometimes it's a physical thing. You know, you get a lot of people that have got shoulder pain and neck problems because they're on a computer like this and they're looking down. Like human beings aren't designed to do that.
But that's also a message that's saying, get outside, go take a walk, get away from the screen.
It's and now like you know, all the physiotherapists and all that sort of stuff are like, you got to stretch opposite. Like if you do that, it's like a lot of people are short-sighted now because they're in a computer like this, and they're looking at this for 10 or 12 hours a day, and they know if they just look at every 40 minutes, if they look out in the distance for a couple of minutes, they will not get short-sightedness because their eyes don't have to adapt. Yeah. But people don't do that, right? They don't do this, and they don't do that. Yeah.
Balance.
Because they'll make up any excuse not to, or they'll just forget. Or yeah. So, but you definitely got to do the emotional stuff. The amount of times where an emotion is causing a physical problem is incredible. Incredible.
Speaking of which, so KS has a question. So KS says, wanting to let go of fear or maybe shame that is sabotaging the healing, not feeling safe and feeling judged. And so this emotional pain, but the emotional pain is really from not feeling of shame, not being judged.
Well, I think we'd go down into what is causing the shame, like go down to the root cause and really explore that. And why did that event happen? And what did you want to learn from it? And then just sort of, you know, unpicking, going to where the root of that fear is, down into that shame, and unpicking the message from that. Because, you know, if it has been long term, as John was saying, that it's attracted more emotion and all these other things coming in. So to really get to that originating event. And then deal with whatever that was, and then you can unravel the whole thing, and the pain and the message doesn't need to be there. So
well, and I think the other big thing there too with shame is forgiveness, self-forgiveness.
Yes.
Yeah, practicing forgiveness.
Yes, forgiveness on the self. So, so what you can do is just focus on that part of her that feels shame, because shame is in our DNA, in our biology, shame is a bad one. You look at any villages and stuff, and shame is a real low emotion. But then she can ask herself, well, why am I feeling shame? And then go, well, what have I done that was so bad to feel the shame? Because I bet she hasn't done anything, like nothing to justify how bad that is. Yeah. Because that's a different part of her. That's not her that's feeling shame. It's a different part of her that's feeling shame. And so that shame is gonna punish her. Shame comes underneath guilt. It's the umbrella. So guilt and then shame is underneath that guilt. And we always say, if you're feeling guilty or shame, Shame will always look for punishment, and punishment will always find pain.
Mhm.
And so that's a emotional problem that she's got to deal with, but it can be so quickly healed, yeah, and released, that then she doesn't have that pain, and that pain will probably be self-sabotage in some way.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
So
And-
that's a definite emotion causing a physical problem.
Yeah. One of the things that a technique that I learned a long time ago too is in your deepest introspection. So meditation, journaling, however you do that, introspection. I don't know how old you are. Maybe you're 85, but the technique says pretend that you're your 80-year-old self looking back on you now. And what would your 80-year-old self or 90-year-old or 100-year-old self, whatever, use whatever age more advanced than what you currently are, looking back on yourself, what would your 80-year-old self say to you? And most of the time, if we're really being thoughtful about what we think we're going to say to ourselves, 30, 40, 50, 60 years into the future, we can begin to understand how minuscule our mistake might be and
Exactly.
that we're feeling shameful about.
Yeah. It's the same with her. If she really thinks about it, where it first came from, she could have done something when she was 5 or 6 or 7 years old. Like she could have, I don't know, I'm just using this as an example. She could have been at a party or something, and she could have accidentally wet her knickers, and her parents have made a mockery out of it or something, and she's gone straight into shame. Yeah, and it was a pure accident because she's just a kid. Yeah, that's what I mean. Like you have to go and what did I do that was actually so bad to warrant that? Yeah, because that can be stuck in that can be stuck in her. Yeah, or it could be school. It could be school related, or oh god, it could be anything. Yeah. But it wouldn't take her long if she really focuses on herself to find out where it came from. Yeah, and then it's very easy to forgive it and to release it. Yeah, once it's gone, well, then the physical symptoms will just evaporate. They'll just go. Yeah, and then she's got to deal with the fear, because fear is a different emotion to shame.
Shame. Yeah.
And
Lynda, I think
children,
you were going to say something.
yeah, I was just thinking on the back of what John was saying, is that what I found is what children process an event very differently. If we go back and we have a look at that event from adults' eyes, you see it very differently. But the child, I'm thinking of things like when a marriage breaks down and the child's like 3 or 4, the child will often internalize, well, if I was a better child, that my parents wouldn't have split up. But if you look at it from an adult's perspective, you would have seen that this was an experience between the parents. And so a lot of stuff can get internalized when you're very young that way, just by the way children process events.
Yeah. All right. So how do you turn pain into power? What does that transmutation look like?
Who are you asking? You can ask Lynda.
You want to respond?
No, go for it, Lynda.
I think it's like the way that you do that is to understand the messages and change your life accordingly. I think that, I mean, that's what we see in QHHT, is that they come with a particular physical problem and then they get given the answer in the direction of why that's happening and to change their life in that direction. I think that it becomes very empowering when you can look at your life events, your pain, whatever has happened from that higher perspective, figure out the lessons, what direction you're supposed to be in, and then it's that's how you get empowered by what's happened physically for you, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think there's two, though. If you begin to almost like build a relationship with pain and suffering, like recognize that it is going to happen so you don't fight against it. And then every time something happens that is challenging for you, physically, emotionally, whatever, then it's like, it's like growth in the bank. If you really begin to see the challenges as gifts, I never said they were pleasant, but to see them as gifts, then the gifts start stacking up, right? And then you're not so afraid or cautious or walking on eggshells, preparing for the next bit of pain and suffering, because it's like, well, of course it's going to happen, and of course I'm going to deal with it, and just like I did with all the others, and in the end it's going to be good, and if it isn't good, it isn't the end. And I mean, you get that practice of having that relationship of acceptance with, there's going to be things that aren't going to be pleasant in this human incarnation. That's the point of the human incarnation.
Yeah, that's right. Humans innately will do anything to get away from pain and get to pleasure, even if they know that pleasure is going to turn into long-term pain. They'll still do it, right, because they're in the present moment. Yeah,
right.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah, and you're right. And sometimes things aren't very nice, but I really admire these people that they've gone through cancer and they've gone through chemo and radiation, or they've gone through a real traumatic injury, and they look back and they go, that was the worst experience of my life, but it was also the best experience of my life, because I look back at my life and I realized that I had to change a few things. Or people that go into the dark night of the soul. The dark night of the soul is painful, man. It's so painful. And when people are down there, I'm so happy for them. Like, I'm like, not in a sadistic way, but I'm like, yes, go there because when you're really in the dark night of the soul, you got nothing, man. You got nothing, and you have to surrender. And who do they go to? They go to the universe, or they go to God to ask for questions. And once they surrender, but then they find their way back up. Yeah. Because they're not avoiding it anymore, because they're having a mental breakdown because they can't avoid it, and that pain is too painful.
Right.
And I'm actually happy for people that go through that.
They've had to surrender to it, so they can't be afraid of it. They can't be
Yes.
rejected.
They surrender to it. Yeah, and it's hideous and it's horrible. And we don't know how long it's going to take.
Right. Right.
But the only way from there is up.
Right.
And people try to avoid going through that because they hate it. Yeah.
Right.
Oh, and sometimes people, the loved ones around them, try to save them from going down into those depths, and it causes them a disservice. You're robbing them of their experience. You often get that with parents sort of coming, oh, my children are heading down this path, it's all going to be terrible. I'm trying to pull them out. It's like, let them have their experience. I see these life stories where the same thing pops up in someone's life time and time again.
Delays it.
Or gets worse because they're not getting a message. Right. Let them have their experience. Let them know that you're there to support them when they've had whatever they needed to learn from that. But
and then that's a different level of pain for the parent, because they have to watch, because they have to let go of control there.
Exactly.
And
that might be why the parent was doing what they were doing, was to avoid their own suffering, and not really.
It usually is.
The unconditional love, like you mentioned, John.
Good luck with that.
It was very conditional, right? Yeah. Very good.
It's coming from a good heart space. It's coming from a good heart space. Yeah.
We're out of time, guys.
Wow, already.
Yeah, already. So, well, let's wrap it up. I'm going to ask you guys, so what are you doing for fun? Like, what is coming into your perspective? What do you want people to know about in terms of either reaching out to you or engaging in an interest that maybe you're engaged in? And maybe they might be interested in the same thing too. So, John, let's start with you. So, what's new in your world? Like, what are you excited about now?
Just starting new chapters. I think starting new chapters is always fun. Yeah, I totally believe in numerology. Like, I totally believe in that. Yeah, especially the 9s and the 1s, and like, man, I talk to so many people. Yeah, and then when you study it and you talk about it and you start being aware of it, man, there's a definite cycle to that. Yeah, I don't know what it is or whatever, but it's definitely, yeah. So I'm coming up to a new chapter in my life, which I'm super excited about. I don't know what it is, but that can be the fun, because I'm kind of a wing it guy, and I just go where the energy flows. I find it's easier like that because then I don't have to try and control it. So I don't stress about it. I just go with it.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I have faith that it's all going to work out in the end, which is good. Yeah.
Yeah.
And if people want to get hold of me, just Google me. John McCluckie, hypnotherapist. There's only one in the world, and that's me. So I'm pretty easy to find.
Awesome. Cool. And Lynda, what's exciting you right now?
Just doing more and more sessions and meeting more and more people and hearing more and more life stories. I love it. I absolutely love it. And I think, and if I had to say there was any other side projects from that, is I really want to get sort of a little bit more traction on writing and just sharing some of the stories, the learnings, the information that's coming in from high consciousness that will help people the most. So I think that's where my time's going to be for the rest of the year.
Cool.
Yeah.
What about you, Holly? Oh, sorry.
So yeah, so
You got to do the contact details for Lynda.
So we've got, oh yeah, sorry, Lynda, contact details.
That's okay. People can either find me through my website, enrichedlifetherapies.com, or on the QHHTofficial.com practitioner listing. Just search for Australia and John and I will be at the top of that. So it's got all our contact details there.
Yeah. Cool. So I've got, speaking of writing, so I got Finding Forgiveness, Surprising Healing from the Higher Self out now. And then that's the second one. And then the first one, which is, you're looking at the cover right behind me, Finding Purpose, Surprising Wisdom from the Higher Self. So those two guys are out there. And yes, it's so much fun sharing QHHT session segments and things like that. So one's about healing and the connection to forgiveness, and the other one is about purpose. And I'm in the middle of writing the third in the trilogy. I didn't know it was a trilogy when they gave me the assignment, but the third in the trilogy is coming out as Finding Gratitude, Surprising Growth from the Higher Self. So this connection between gratitude and growth. And then for everybody who's on YouTube here, so on my YouTube channel, we have Dolores Cannon Fans. It's a membership group, and once a month we do a legit Dolores Cannon group progression, and we talk all things Dolores, and we share Dolores stories, and there's Dolores Cannon freebies and giveaways and t-shirts and books and all kinds of fun stuff. So if you're a Dolores Cannon fan, come and join us. And every month we kind of get our jonesing on Dolores out of the way.
Cool.
So yeah. All right, Lynda. All right, John. Thank you so much for joining me on your Sunday morning and my Saturday night.
Pleasure.